Alright folks, so if you saw the last video, you know what we got going on here, so let's not jack around with a bunch of introductions. Let's just get busy and see if we can get this thing back together today. Alright, so the last thing that I did on the van yesterday was I filled it with radiator fluid and I pressure tested the coolant system. Now how I did that is I used this particular kit that I got off Amazon. This kit has all kinds of different fittings for different vehicles, but it basically aids you in working with your coolant system. So one of the things you can do is you can create a vacuum on your coolant system, so that way before you even put any radiator fluid in at all, you can kind of check for any major leaks. But then it also, using that vacuum, can suck radiator fluid into the system, which should help alleviate any bubbles in the system or air pockets in the system. Then the last things couple last things that you can do is it also comes with this pump kit and a bunch of different fittings, so you can test the pressure on your radiator cap and also test the pressure on the system itself. You can hook this to the system, pump it up to the manufacturer's specifications for how much pressure it should be able to hold, and then you can check to make sure that you can kind of inspect the system at that point and make sure you don't have any leaks. Now, one of the things that I'm doing right now is like I said, is I'm going to test this radiator cap. A lot of people don't realize how important these caps are, that they work properly. This one is stamped for 13 psi, and that's the amount of pressure it should be able to hold back before it starts to let any radiator fluid through into the reserve bottle. So we're going to test that right now. Alright, so I've got a bucket of water here. I've got my little pump, the adapters that I need that came with the kit, and then this is the radiator cap that I took off of the van, and I'm going to test it, make sure that it is still good. So basically make sure everything's wet, make sure all your seals are clean. I've got like I said, this bucket is full of water. I'm just going to stuff it down in there now, and I'm going to check. It should be able to hold up to close to 13 psi, so we're just going to pump some air into it, and I can see that it is not working. I'm only getting up to about 8 psi, and there's a lot of air escaping, so this cap is no good. I kind of expected that might be a case, so when I was at Napa, I bought a new radiator cap, so we're going to check it just to make sure that it works. So we're going to pump some air into it, and it seems to be holding. We're getting up right up to like 13 pounds. It should, if I push it past 13, it should, yep. Okay, so this cap seems to be working. So I'm going to go ahead and get put this one on. Now, I actually wanted to buy a Motocraft radiator cap, and I couldn't find one in the area, so I've got one on order that I'm going to put on the van, but we'll go ahead and use this new radiator cap. Most of the ones that you get from the auto parts store are just some, you know, they may have a different name at the auto parts store, but they're all just rebranded Motorads. You'll probably find like this one I got at Napa, it's a Motorad, but I happen to know that I got this one at a different auto parts store, and it also says it's a Motorad. So they're just all rebranded Motorads, most of them. So I do recommend that if you're going to do these on the radiator cap, that you should probably go with the manufacturer's radiator cap, in my case Motocraft. So like I said, I've got one, or actually two on order. I ordered two just to have one as a spare. Alright, so I'm just filling up the reservoir up to the cold line. I've already got the radiator, like I said, all filled up, and that's good to go. One of the things that kind of came up in conversation at the auto parts store is whether or not you should use distilled water or tap water when you're mixing your 50-50 mix of radiator coolant and water. Now, I've always used distilled water because I was told that tap water could put minerals into your system, which could cause rust and other corrosion. So, but they said no, you can put tap water. Tap water's fine. That's what they always use. So what's your guys' opinion on that? Tap water or distilled water? I think that distilled water is pretty cheap to buy at the grocery store, so I'm going to stick with distilled water, but curious to see what you guys have to say about it. Alright guys, so I'm just putting oil back in the pan. I went ahead and drained what was in there just to make sure that if anything fell down inside while I was working with the timing chain cover off, that we got it out of there. I'm not doing a full oil change at this point because I know I just did one not too long ago and my oil filter is pretty fresh. But what I intend to do is just to run the van once we get it all back together, run the van for about a week, and then I'll do another full oil change just to be on the safe side. So if you've ever wondered what the numbers on these oil jugs mean, sometimes you have ones like this one here that has 2 numbers, and then you have ones that just have a single number. The 2 number ones are a multi-weight oil, and the W that you see there doesn't actually stand for weight. A lot of people think it stands for weight, but it actually stands for winter. And what it means is this is going to be a 5-weight oil in the winter or in cold weather, and a 30-weight oil when the vehicle's warmed up or if it's summertime and it's already warm. If you have another jug that only has a single number on it, say it says just 30 weight, then it's 30 weight no matter what, no matter if it's cold or hot. In this case, like I said, a multi-weight, you take the first number, that's what it's going to be in cold temperatures or when the engine is cold, and the second number is what it will eventually be once the engine is either warm or if it's already hot outside. And the advantage to that is if it is cold outside, the lower viscosity will allow the engine to lubricate itself and make sure everything gets well lubricated until the engine gets warmed up. If it's really cold outside and you got a single weight oil, it may make the oil real sludgy and it won't want to lubricate as well in that cold temperatures.
So of course you should always use the recommended oil for your application. In my case, I'm using 5W30 because that's what's recommended by Ford for my van.
Alright guys, so we don't have everything together obviously, but we have the van together enough to where we can start it and start testing everything and make sure everything's good. Now like I said, I've already pressure tested the radiator system, so I'm feeling really confident that that's all good. But if there is anything that's not quite right, I didn't want to have everything on the van and then have to tear everything back apart to be able to get to it. So we're going to do some testing now. The first thing I'm going to do is Megan's going to help me. She's going to start the van, and I'm just going to double check the timing and make any minor adjustments because we did put a new timing chain on it. Should be pretty close, but I had it a little bit advanced before just because it seemed to lug a little bit. So I'm thinking with the new timing chain, I want to get it back to top dead center, or 10 degrees, which is what it's supposed to be, and have it at that and see how it runs there for a while. Okay, let's try it.
So prior to starting the van, I put a mark on the flywheel on the 10-degree mark so that way it'd be easier to see with the timing gun. As I suspected, there was just a minor adjustment that needed to be made, and the van seemed to be running really smooth.
Okay, well, at this point we've ran the van for a little bit. We got it up to operating temperature, checked everything out, let it cool down. Everything looks good, so I'm feeling confident now that we are okay to start putting all this back onto the front of Sasquatch. So we're going to start working on that now. I kind of wish I would have taken a few more pictures so that I remembered exactly the order that everything came off, but well, I'm sure we'll get it figured out.
So putting the front of the van back together was actually pretty simple. There was a couple points where I got ahead of myself and put some things on out of order, and I ended up having to take them off, which is always a little bit frustrating. But for the most part, this was pretty simple. So this is where things got difficult. The bumper itself is really not that heavy, and I can lift it by myself. But once you add the weight of the 15,000-pound Warren winch, then it becomes too much for me to handle by myself, and I have to use the jack. It's a little bit awkward to work with here, and you can see me struggling a bit, but we eventually did get it on and all wired back up.
Alright, so we're getting ready to do the last piece here, which is putting in the air intake, which many of you that may be familiar with the Econoline probably realize this is not the stock air intake, and it is not. It's actually one that I kind of put together and fabricated myself because the stock air intake on the Econoline is pretty crappy and it was really restrictive. This is kind of a prototype, and I have ideas for having specifically this piece here remade in a 3D printer, and so that it's a little bit more aerodynamically designed, but it definitely does work, and I can definitely feel the improvement in how Sasquatch performs. All right, guys, well, she's all back together and out of the shop, and I've had enough shop time for the past 3 days, so I'm gonna get the heck out of here and back up into the mountains. I hope you guys enjoyed this little quick vlog on how I put Sasquatch together and fixed it, and kind of a couple little tips and tricks along the way. But we're gonna get out of here. Leave a like, leave a comment, and we will see you guys again outside.